people I think are falling the most behind. And we've made a commitment that we're going to hire over the next couple of years 10,000 new science and math teachers. And we're going to work with the schools to help redesign their math and science curriculums so that we start boosting. I want to get to the point where we're number one in science and math. And I also want to make sure, by the way, that that's true for all students. Because I'll be honest with you, African-American students, Latino students, we're doing worse in science and math than the overall average. So America's at 21st and 25th, but if you actually looked at performance of Latino and African-American students, it would be even lower. And that's inexcusable because that's the fastest growing portion of our population. That's our future. That's our future workforce. And so we've got to have the most skilled, most highly trained workers in the world, and this is what we're going to be focusing on over the next couple of years. Now, last point I'm going to make, and then I'm just going to open it up, because I promised I wouldn't give a long speech. This election coming up in November is going to offer a choice on a whole range of different issues. And this issue of education gives you a sense of the choice that I think Democrats are trying to make and the choice that the Republicans are trying to make. The Republicans recently put out what they call their Pledge to America. And it basically outlined what their priorities are. Their number one economic priority is retaining $700 billion tax breaks to the wealthiest 2% of the country, millionaires and billionaires mostly. We'd have to borrow the $700 billion because we don't have it. Right? We got these deficits and debt. So we'd have to borrow the $700 billion from China or the Saudis or whoever is buying our debt. And then we'd pass out, on average, a $100,000 check to people who are making $1 million up to more than $1 billion. That's their main economic plan. And when you ask them, well, how would you pay for some of this stuff, they don't really have good answers. But one way they would pay for it is to cut back our education spending by 20% and eliminate about 200,000 Head Start programs and reduce student aid to go to college for about 8 million students. That's one of their answers. And I just have to say, look, China, that's not the decision they're making about their education system and their kids. South Korea, that's not the decision that they're making about their kids. I was in Shanghai, and I talked to the mayor. He said, teachers are the most respected of professions, as much as doctors or engineers, and they're paid, to reflect how much we value them. I was in South Korea, and I was talking to the president having lunch, and he said, my biggest problem in education is the parents are so demanding. They're insisting that I ship in English people from the United States and other English-speaking countries because they want all their kids to learn English by the time they're in third grade. I mean, that's their mindset. That's the competition that they're in. So they're not cutting back on education right when we know that that's going to be the most important thing in determining our success over the long term. And we can't either. And so I just want everybody to think about those kinds of issues as you go into the polling place in November. Who's going to prioritize our young people to make sure they've got the skills they need to succeed over the long term? Nothing's going to be more important in terms of our long-term success. All right? So with that, let me just open it up to any comments or questions people may have about anything. I talked a lot about education, but people may have a whole bunch of different interests here, and I'd love to hear from you. And we've got mics so that everybody can hear your questions. Okay? Let's start with this young lady right here. And introduce yourself again, even though I got all your names, I'm getting older, so it's harder to remember these things.
Good morning, Mr. President. Welcome to Albuquerque. My name is Catarina Sandoval Tonini, and I have 2 questions for you this morning, if I may.
Sure.
The first question has to do with the changing demographics here in our neighborhood as well as in the public school system. I grew up here in this neighborhood. I'm raising my own family here. I work at a local public school here. And I have seen over the years firsthand how recent immigrants have revitalized our local economy. They start small businesses, they hire locally, they live within the community. How do you envision a comprehensive immigration reform as one measure towards America's economic recovery and long-term vitality?
I have consistently, even before I was a presidential candidate, but when I was a U.S. Senator and when I was running for U.S. Senator, said that we have to move forward on comprehensive immigration reform. Bill Richardson and I have had a lot of conversations about this. This is a nation of immigrants. It was built on immigrants. Immigrants from every corner of the globe who brought their talent and their drive and their energy to these shores because this was the land of opportunity. Now, we're also a nation of laws, so we've got to make sure that our immigration system is orderly and fair. And so I think Americans have a legitimate concern if the way we've set up our immigration system and the way we are securing our borders is such where people just kind of come and go as they please. Well, that means that folks who are waiting, whether it's in Mexico City or in Nairobi, Kenya, or in Warsaw, Poland, if they're waiting there filling out their forms and doing everything legally and properly, and it takes them 5 years or 6 years or 10 years before they're finally here and made legal, well, it's not fair to them if folks can just come and ignore those laws. So what I think is so important to do is for us to both be a nation of laws and affirm our immigrant traditions. And I think we can do that. So what I've said is, look, yes, let's secure our borders. Yes, let's make sure that the legal immigration system is more fair and efficient than it is right now, because if the waiting times were lessened, then a lot of people would be more prone to go through a legal route than through an illegal route. Let's make sure that we're cracking down on employers who are taking advantage of undocumented workers to not pay them overtime or not pay them minimum wage or not give them bathroom breaks. Let's make sure that we're cracking down on employers to treat all workers fairly. And let's provide a pathway to citizenship for those who are already here, understanding that, they broke the law, so they're going to have to pay a fine and pay back taxes. And I think learn English, make sure that they don't have a criminal record. There are some hoops that they're going to have to jump through, but giving them a pathway is the right thing to do. Now, unfortunately, right now, this is getting demagogued. A lot of folks think it's an easy way to score political points, is by trying to act as if that there's a them and an us instead of just an us. And I'm always suspicious of a politics that is dividing people instead of bringing them together. I think now's the time for us to come together, and I think that economically, immigrants can actually be a huge source of strength to the country. So one of our big advantages is we've got a younger population than Europe, for example, or Japan, because we welcome immigrants, and they generally don't. And that means that our economy is more vital, and we've got more people in the workforce who are going to be out there working and starting businesses and supporting us when we're retired and making sure Social Security is solvent. All those things are important. So this is a priority that I continue to have. Frankly, the problem I've had right now is that, and I don't want to get into sort of inside baseball about Washington, but basically the rules in the United States Senate have evolved so that if you don't have 60 votes, you can't get anything through the United States Senate right now. And several years ago, we had 11 Republican senators who were willing to vote for comprehensive immigration reform, including John McCain. They've all reversed themselves. I can't get any of them to cooperate, and I don't have 60 Democrats in the Senate. And so we're going to have to do this on a bipartisan basis. And my hope is that the Republicans who have said no and have seen their party, I think, use some unfortunate rhetoric around this issue. My hope is that they come back and say, this is something that we can work on together to solve a problem instead of trying to score political points. Okay. All right. Who's next? Yes, sir. Right here.
Pacheco. My name is David Pacheco, and I work for the New Mexico VA healthcare system.
Uh-huh.
My question is that I think as an integral part of being Hispanic, being from here, home is very integral to that. And not only for Hispanics, for all New Mexicans, for all Americans. And yet I hear stories of my family members, friends, veterans that I treat, of losing their homes due to this economy that we've been through or are going through. And I guess my question is, what are we doing to prevent people from losing their homes? I know education is truly incredible. I mean, it moves people beyond what we can ever expect. But if we don't have homes to go to, what good is the education?
Well, the housing crisis helped to trigger the financial crisis. And it's a complicated story, but essentially what happened was banks started seeing money in peddling what looked like these very low interest rate mortgages, no money down, started peddling these things to folks. A lot of people didn't read the fine print where they had adjustable rate mortgages or balloon payments, and they ended up being in situations where they were in homes that they couldn't necessarily afford. The banks made a whole bunch of money on all these mortgages that were being generated. But what happened is that when the housing market started going down, then all these financial instruments that were built on a steady stream of payments for mortgages, they all went bust, and that helped to trigger the entire crisis. So the housing issue has been at the heart of the economic crisis that we're in right now. It is a big problem because part of what happened over the last several years is that we built more homes than we had families to absorb them. And what's happened now is that housing values have declined around the country, in some places worse than others. In Nevada, in Arizona, they've been very badly hit. In New Mexico, I don't think we had the same bubble, and so prices have not been as badly affected here. But overall across the country, housing lost a lot of value. Now, this is a multi-trillion-dollar market, so there's no government program where we can just make sure that whoever's losing their home, that we can just pick up the tab and make sure that they can pay. And frankly, there's some people who really bought more home than they could afford, and they'd be better off renting, or they're going to have to make adjustments in terms of their house. What we have tried to do, though, is to make sure that people